So this is three members of the Librarian of Babel Collective ad hoc, speaking from collectively Caguas, Puerto Rico, Berlin, Germany, and Massachusetts in the United States. My name is Paula Phillips. I'm the head librarian. We are here today with the two curators who agreed to be jurors for this show. We have Dermis Leon, who did her master's degree at the Center for Curatorial Studies at Bard College, and she is a guest professor at the Hubei Institute in Wuhan, China. She's also a freelance curator and writer, and is an author of a great many books on art, and has curated all around the world. We also have today Quintin Rivera Toro. He is Caguas, Puerto Rico. He got his MFA at the Rhode Island School of Design, and he earned his PhD at the Universidad Politécnica de Valencia. He currently is an assistant professor in the Humanities Department at the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras. So, hello guys.
Hello. Hi.
So,
Hi, Paula.
oh, I should introduce myself.
You should introduce yourself. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Paula Phillips, and I am the director behind this show. I originated the Librarian of Babel initially as a persona in 2015, and as the years have gone by, it's become a continually collaborative effort. So now the Librarian of Babel is usually referring to the group, which is odd but true. And so I gave myself a new title as head librarian. I got my BFA from the Lime Academy in Connecticut, and I got my MFA from the Transart Institute in Berlin. And currently I am the Librarian of Babel. So we're going to have a roundtable discussion, and the format will be that one person will ask the other two a question, and then they will discuss. So if whoever's asking the question, mute yourself so the other two will have the air. So Quintin, I think the first question is yours. Actually,
Okay.
Don't mute yourself. Just let's all stay on. Why not?
All right. Yeah. If some loud motorcycles swing by, which they often do nowadays in Puerto Rico, I will mute myself. So good morning to both Paula and Dermis. For me, it's very exciting to have participated in this project. My first question is geared towards my motivation to why I wanted to participate in this project. So I wanted to quickly bring in the idea that over the past summer, I got to learn about the South Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han, and I started sort of like getting introduced to his ideas, which are beautiful, of course, dense. But I particularly, I got a couple of books on Amazon, and I started like scratching on the agony of Eros. And it was kind of depressing, honestly, even if beautiful, to kind of get acquainted with some of those ideas. And I came across a quote that I wanted to mention very quickly, which was that there's a present day crisis for art and literature, and that it could be attributed to a crisis of fantasy, where the other disappears. And in other words, that is the agony of Eros, right? And so the disappearance of the other is very much like what's going on today with masking ourselves, right? We can only see people through their eyes now, which conversely is really interesting because you can sort of now see that we're all looking at each other's eyes, right? Now we're all kind of like, you know, what they say, looking into each other's souls. But it's like, but we don't know who the other person is. Like, I often find myself asking people to, like, show me your face, please, you know? So within this disappearance of the self and the crises, I feel that we've come across a historical project, which is the BABEL Masks, right? So how do you guys feel in terms of coining a project at a very specific juncture in history? How do you feel about the fact that we put together a project that is kind of like a photograph of what we're living today in the year 2020? How do you feel about the disappearance of the other?
Deramis, do you want to go first?
Well, there are many issues that you are discussing there about the disappearance of the self. There's another question about identity. There's another question about masking yourself for a particular reason. I have to bring up my experience from Wuhan, for instance, where I have been teaching since 2018, every year. And my first experience looking at people in the subway in Beijing, in Shanghai, in Wuhan, was a lot of people wearing masks. First in Beijing, it was a very strong experience for me because I was looking what is going on, why people are wearing masks all the time. Not everyone, but it was winter time. And then I noticed that I couldn't breathe outside. My friends told me, you have to wear a mask because contamination is so strong there that you will get sick. So I was like, okay, so I have to wear a mask, you know. You know, in China, there's a very heavy surveillance system. You know, there are millions of cameras in everywhere. So I was asking myself, well, you wear a mask and you hide your identity, but at the same time, people can notice who you are, that you are a foreigner, no? That's one thing. And second, yeah, they have a strong system surveillance system that no matter what kind of things you wear, you must be yourself, they can get your identity. So are we, the Western, prepared for this? So that was my first question. And of course, I have to wear the mask, otherwise I get sick. And then I noticed in Wuhan, girls were using masks as well. I said, are they sick? Or because the contamination in Wuhan was not so strong, like in Beijing, and especially in summertime. And then sometimes girls told me, okay, I couldn't make my makeup, so I have to wear the mask. I don't want people to see me without makeup. I was, what? So
I taught at Northeastern University, and I had a lot of Chinese students. And it was the same thing. They'd come in with their masks, and I'd be like, "Are you guys sick?" Because I had to look after the.
Yes.
They'd be like, "No, I just didn't put any makeup on." And I'd be like, "Come on." So
exactly.
Like now, it would be very different, but at that time, it was like, you need to be present in this classroom. You need to lose the mask. So they were embarrassed. And looking back on it, I'm not sure I would insist. I was thinking at it from a teacher's point of view and not from a more group-oriented standpoint. But that's an instrument for them in that way.
So my first thinking was how respectful is people, because if they're sick, they're protecting the other people from their illness, but they realize there are many issues around that. So they really were comfortable wearing the mask. It was kind of normal.
Mm-hmm.
No? So, and then all this situation about COVID and pandemic came from Wuhan. actually from China, and hit United States, South America, the whole world. And then we have another situation, for instance, in Berlin, especially in Berlin, that people were rejecting wearing a mask. By the way, we already have a social distance. I guess in the United States as well, we have like a 1 meter around me. You cannot touch me. You cannot get near to me. So, but in Berlin, wearing a mask, when I get back from South America, where I was doing a project, I wear a mask. It was in March this year. And people laugh on me. And people were, telling me disgusting things on the street. Like, what are you doing? Why are you wearing this mask? So little by little, through the government negotiations, people have to start wearing a mask. And then it's becoming normal. But what kind of mask we are wearing? We're wearing a protective mask for health. We're not talking about mask. We have a history of mask. Masks have a very strong tradition in different countries. So we are talking about two different things here, about hiding your identity with a mask or wearing a mask for healthy reasons. So that's what I say, that depending on the context, the country, and the situation, and you are talking about different issues here, Quintin. You're talking about the crisis of identity or the crisis of fantasy, or exactly what kind of issue? Because BABEL mask open up a kind of fantasy to build a mask, but at the same time, building a mask to hide identity, not only to hide identity to protect yourself, but the answer that we get in the whole project, it was all not about protecting yourself and the other, but hiding yourself. And that's interesting.
Well, so, one thing that struck me as I was talking to you, Deramis, about my students is saying that, my reaction to having two students among all the rest wearing masks was, the reason I wanted them to remove their masks was because what I said, you need to be present for this. So that actually is a direct reflection of, what Quintin's talking about, which is the disappearance, both of the other, and once everybody's wearing a mask, or whoever is masked, the disappearance of the self. And both of those things are disconcerting. In other words, if my assumption at that time was, if you're wearing a mask in my classroom, you're keeping part of yourself back. Now that, that was before I understood a few other things. But it seems to play out that when I'm in company, which happens very rarely, I've been in isolation for almost 8 months now. But the few times that I'm in company with others, there's a kind of sadness around seeing a very dear friend, at a distance, wearing a mask and wanting very badly to see their face. And, it's not a smart idea. And I can't take my mask off either. So as I'm reacting to what they're saying, if I'm smiling or, oh, that's too bad or whatever, this is all the expression I get. This doesn't happen. So that does produce anxiety around, I can't really tell this person how I feel. They're not going to be able to interpret who I am and how I am in this moment. And at the same time, this sadness that's almost an absence of, I really wish I could see you, even though they're standing right in front of me. And it's possible that there are some interpretations of wearing a mask that reach into that psychological corner that say, this is part of my vital self, my vital existence. Your face is your mask. The expressions allow you to show what you want to show, but it's also your sort of, it's your avatar. It's what the world is able to identify you by. So why this, your question came down to, why do you think this happened, this mask idea happened at this particular time? And it's possible that what I was craving was to see a more flamboyant or focused expression of the self through the mask. So thinking about it, it's kind of a figure ground, inside-outside boundary being blurred, because their masks are bringing out something about them and telling us something about them. So instead of just a piece of cloth, even a piece of decorated cloth, it's, you know, these masks are wonderful. They have dimension, they have humor, they have, you know, frightful aspects, some of them, but they tell a story about the person wearing it. And it, in that way, it functions as fashion can function, which is to announce to the world who you are.
Yes,
Quintin.
Yeah. Okay.
First Quintin and then Darius.
My turn. Okay. No, I just wanted to pick up on some of the points that Paula just mentioned, because as perhaps dark and sad and confusing as these times may be, here I feel that art comes to the rescue, you know, and this is very much what I based my short writing on, you know, like I titled it Faceless Times, Forceful Masks, right? Like I agree with Paula that all of a sudden there's a need for flamboyancy. There's a need to stand out. There's a need to say, I am here, look at me, I am different. I am not just another mask taken from the box, disposable. I am very much an individual person. And so it is true that there's this sort of like dual relationship between hidden and shown, or, you know, sort of like, I don't want to call it binary, definitely, but there's like an on-off relationship to the revealing of the face or the hiding of the face. But the creativity of the artist's spirit transcends that sort of like dual relationship, because all of a sudden it's like, well, you can't see my face, but there's nobody else wearing a huge flower on the face that projects like 20 inches into space, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I love that about this project.
I'll take the next question. Dermis, in your essay, there are two things that seem to me a little bit related. You talk about the fact that we are sick and we need a cure, but we don't necessarily need a cure from COVID-19. We need a cure from mindset. I wanted to ask a little bit more about that, and just, you know, what can you talk about that mindset? What is making us sick?
Well, before we go to that question, I would like to point out something regarding this sadness of we cannot see the other. No.
Oh, yes.
I think, yes. I think for us it's very important to see the face, because we have this strong perception about the other, the self, the identity. In the West, our identity, how we produce this face, is what we talk about the other, no? And we refer to ourselves. This is very important for us. So hiding the face is a kind of a statement, like we are erasing ourselves. I talk about from the West perception, because our face is very important. We have the distance already, you know, the social distance that we have, you know, in South America and Puerto Rico. But in Europe, we have this social distance. So we have the face, we produce the face, no, in order to talk with each other. But in China, no. In China, personal identity is a matter of producing the whole body. Hiding the face is actually not a big concern, only if you produce the whole thing. No? So, at least in China, the girls are very concerned with the whole body. So what are we going to do if we hide the face? We should produce the whole body, and that's what interesting in the mask. No, when you create this mask in the BABEL project, you don't need the body because already the whole mask is talking about the whole person. So I agree with Quintin. So it's like a look at me. You don't need to see the whole thing. You already look in my face, my face with this mask is my identity. It's a new identity. And then I have another question about this erasing the gender, which is something else. But about that, why we are sick? We are sick because we are paranoid. It's like we cannot believe in anything with the media, with what the government say, so many articles, so many opinions. So we are in shock because we are insecure. What is going on? So what is our standpoint? What are we going to do? What is the future? So that's what I was telling about my experience in China. I was asking myself, if this is the future, we are really in a big trouble. But now is our present. And that's why we are in shock. Because we didn't realize, we talk about contamination, we're talking about destruction, we're talking about many things, what we don't feel is not present in our life. Because it doesn't affect me. No, it doesn't affect me. But now I'm really in shock because I don't know who you are. Mm-hmm. So we already, as Latinos, I talk about Quintin, we have to learn how to read a face. In Germany, for instance, people don't really show their emotions. That's where we are talking here. And now, of course, I already, I mean, we are so, with the mask, we are expression, there's no expression. How we are going to read you, you know, it's more difficult to read. If you're in a meeting, you know, with the director of your business or something like that, how are you going to read that face? So there are many things here that why we are in shock. So now we are feel like, okay, this is all related to ourselves. It's not about that we are sad because of all these homeless, we are sad with all these stray dogs. No, we already are part of that. So when I say we are sick, it's because we cannot see the other's illness until we have this illness and we feel in danger about who you are, who are you talking, what are your emotions, and also because we can get sick and we can die. We are going to die anyway, but not in the way that we are expecting. So there are many, many issues. And what's happening now, and that's my concern about, is depending in our position in this society, in where you are, in Puerto Rico, in Germany, or in the United States, whatever, is...
you know, I agree with what Dermis is saying. I love it that she's bringing up these cultural contrasts, right? As Latinos, we tend to think of ourselves as people that are extremely, gesture-driven. We always say we speak with our hands constantly. We're always emphasizing what we do with our hands, right? And I remember distinctly understanding, intuiting that difference precisely in Berlin, Germany, which is where Paula and I met during Trans Art Institute studies. I understood instantly that there's a different way to behave, right? And so
Yes.
I incorporated to that behavior. Like I instantly stood up straight in the subways. I was very polite. I waited for my turn to speak. And so these cultural clashes, I feel that very interestingly, as Dermis points out in her essay, when quoting Deleuze and Guattari about the reterritorialization of the face, right,
Yes.
of the body, right?
Yes.
I remember perhaps 15 years ago, Paula, is this not true, while we were studying together in Berlin, that there was a lot of talk about the mapping approach to art making. There was a lot of talking about the erasure of frontiers, right? There was a lot of talking about the division of geography as political identity, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
this
Yes.
idea that the reterritorialization of the face, i.e. masking ourselves, has all of a sudden effectively erased all frontiers around the globe. Now all of a sudden we're unified as a paranoid culture, perhaps, or we're all unified as a sad culture. We cannot hug each other anymore. So, I mean, I just really like the way that Dermis closed her essay by saying that this is not the future, but the present that we need to collectively dance, right? I love
Yes.
that idea. Again, it's like literature and poetry and art rescuing our hope. You know, it's like,
Yes.
well, we're here. This is shit. Nevertheless, we can make it beautiful. We can dance together. We can sing together and just take life as difficult as it is and make something better of it.
Well, because
I'm sorry I said shit.
no, not at all. I say
I meant
that
the world.
because we are utopian people, but
Yeah.
in truth, what is going on is the contrary. I mean, countries are at this idea of tribalization. They are more and more, and they are closing the borders. It's happening all the contrary. That's what is going on, you know.
Well, so do you think that this also is not just that people are becoming a global tribe in the way that you mentioned, but and becoming a sad tribe and a paranoid tribe possibly, but that maybe some of the animosity towards wearing a mask means don't force me to be part of a tribe. You know, you're taking away my own tribal identity to put some other tribal identity onto me that is blank. That it's not just an erasure of identity of the self, but it's an erasure of your identity of belonging. Do you think that that is part of it?
If I may quickly mention that as much as I love often sort of like going into the deeper layers of psychological behavior, like honestly, I think a lot of it just has simply to do with oppositionality. It's like, you know, because we antagonize on very superficial levels just to differentiate from each other. You know, like thinking about North American politics, you know, so you get two choices. You're Democratic or you're Republican. So if you say this, I will do that. If you say this, I will do that. And often people lose track of the bigger picture. Like, I understand it's very complex. Like, I love the fact that I was COVID positive, okay? I got COVID early in March. Like, I got COVID the 14th of March, January, February, March, right? So I was one of the earlier cases in Puerto Rico of a person who got COVID. And of course, I don't want to minimize anybody's experience and its case by case. But honestly, you know, I will wear a mask. Definitely, I will cooperate because this is the larger structure. But I often don't want to. I don't want to wear it, but I will wear it just to not antagonize. I will wear it just to cooperate because I often think that also this kind of a positionality comes with this sort of like supra-capitalist, individual celebration of I will be the protagonist of my own movie, even if I'm the only one watching it. So those ideals of like I can also be famous and rich, I can also be, number one. I think it's passé. I think it's old news. I think we need to move on from this like neoliberal, like get everything now, towards a more cooperative way of being. And perhaps we can re-signify the idea of tribalism. Perhaps like the global tribe, like perhaps we can start thinking, this is kind of a 90s term, but I still love it. I still use it. Like we have to be global, we have to be globally local. So anyway, so please go ahead.
Dermis, I think it's
Next
your
question.
turn. Next question. That's going to be Dermis.
Well, I have a very simple question, and it's for me it called my attention the mask in this project. You cannot identify a female or a gender. No, only part of some of them with the flowers, the strong presence of flowers, which is very female thing. No, but most of them were really hiding mostly the whole face. And my question about that is we already were talking about this kind of situation, erasing the identity or creating a new one, a fantasy. Because my question is, okay, all the mask, the regular mask that you have to wear, the one that the governments suggest you to use it, is all the same. Okay, so this is white with a number and so on. But people, and that's what I talk about, different contexts and culture. Some places they are starting using the same mask, but masking the mask. This white, this general mask. No, so I think it was kind of answer to okay, I want to be a person behind the mask. So my question is, there's this tendency to follow up the orders from the government and use the regular mask, everyone the same. And there's another tendency which artists are part of, creative people with a strong ego and individuality, to say, no, I want to use the mask to express myself. And there's something that I really, I'm curious about. What do you think, guys? That, yes, is a strong identity, a strong construction of a landscape, face landscape, but at the same time, there's no gender. What do you think about this?
So one thing that I'd like to highlight, because I failed to do this at the very beginning, is that this entire discussion is about the show BABEL Masks. Maybe we should mention that. And the concept is, what if masks stay with us from now on?
Yes.
And if you go 100 years in the future, and you look at what people are wearing, in the hands of artists, how will masks evolve? What will become of those? And 100 years is a long time, for example, in the timeline of fashion. So if you can think about like what Jean-Paul Gaultier would do with such a thing, that would be, or Alexander McQueen, or Lady Gaga. I mean, the way that people will push that format. And one of those ways, so we ask the artists, show me a mask from 100 years from now. Be the artist that made that mask 100 years from now. So that, I believe, caused them to really push the parameters and push the boundaries of what a mask can be and how it can operate. But they were doing it out of their own instincts of how to deal with the problems that we've been talking about. So in this case, the hiding of gender is an interesting question, because it may cause everyone to have to relate to one another in a slightly different way, and not necessarily in a desexualizing way. If anything, it may be possible that people will awaken to their sexuality by being attracted to someone regardless of gender, and then realize, oh, okay. But there's a leveling of the playing field that could be demonstrated by, I believe it was in the 1930s or 50s, that in symphony orchestras there were no female musicians and no female conductors, and they all had this belief that only men could be truly excellent musicians, and women were never hired. And there was one famous incident where a conductor put up a screen so that all you could see was the musician, like from the calf down. You could see their feet, but you couldn't see anything else. Or maybe it was even that you just couldn't see the musician. So they performed their music behind a screen. And that was the moment when the scales tipped. And now in symphony orchestras, it can be 40 or 50% women, because it proved by the product, by the music, that it didn't matter if you were male or female, you were presenting this experience. So, considering that we have a lot of inequality concerning gender right now, I wonder if this is a kind of, if not equalizing, maybe even an erasing of those distinctions, but erasing in a positive way. And I think erasure is something that is really, really frightening to humans, because that's what this disease threatens to do, is it threatens to erase us. But if someone said, what if I could take an obstacle out of your way? Even that's a little bit scary to step across into, because you're going to have to let go of not just parts of your appearance, but parts of your way of thinking about things. And we're already in the midst of several large, almost tectonic shifts in the way that we relate to each other. We've been hit with several massive crises all at once. So that's how I see the androgynous nature, or maybe the sexless nature of the mask. Is it doesn't necessarily cancel things out, but it will also provoke mental viewpoints.
Wow, that's fantastic, Paula.
Yeah.
I wish I could touch upon many of the things that you brought up. Perhaps I can go from the later to the earlier.
Sure.
I definitely think and feel very much so here in Puerto Rico. We have felt the geological clashing of nature. Okay, we have gone through devastating hurricanes, storms. We have had earthquakes or tremors, which are unknown for at least the last 100 years in Puerto Rico. There was a meteorite. Like, we saw a meteorite fall into the north coast of the island, which is crazy. So as we confront the weather of the future, which is now, today, I think that humans are reformulating all sorts of approaches to being. Okay, so we're questioning down to the core of our belief system. You know, it may be religious beliefs, it may be ethical beliefs, and certainly I think gender beliefs, right? The way that all of a sudden we think about, um, you know, the last day of our lives, the apocalypse, right? All these natural phenomena that are occurring makes us fear for our own lives. It makes us think, well, what if the world was ending tomorrow? Where do I run to? Who's the last person I need to tell I love you, right? So this helps us shed instantly, very quickly. I mean, I don't know about instantly, but it helps us shed very, very quickly our fears of being judged, our fears of performing a certain identity, you know? And so, all of a sudden it's like, you know what? And a lot of this is, of course, preceded by all the work that feminism has been doing for the last 75 years, aggressively, through academia, through social activism. All of a sudden, we all know there's a sweep. There's an ideological sweep happening of political correctness in
Yes.
language, in like institutional politics. Like there is intolerance to uh, harassment. There's intolerance to secrecy of these diagonal patriarchal inequities and injustices. So I am very happy to be living in this moment in time where it's like they're pulling the rug from under patriarchy. And so I think that because of all this prior work, the plus community, LGBTQIA plus, this whole um, spreading and lucidity and awareness of the fact that I can almost pick and choose my identity, and I myself feel liberated. I identify as a hetero male. Nevertheless, I now feel empowered to have my mannerisms. Like I've been mocked, I've been bullied all my life because I have mannerisms. Is what we call them here in Puerto Rico. Ese tiene manerismo. Mira, I remember my grandma being
Yeah.
like, "Don't you think he's like
Yes.
like she would do this gesture?" And I felt so offended,
He's
And
so
it's like,
feminine. Yeah.
so I would just punctualize this finally, which is going back to the masks. Like I feel that all of a sudden they gave us a pretext, like they gave us a reason to lash out against this normative behavior. If they give us a white mask with a number, we will turn it into a canvas. This is a
Yes.
white surface, and I'm gonna paint all over it. I'm gonna sculpt it. I'm gonna add on to it. I'm gonna like make it crazy because that's what creative spirits do. Like there's a big cave in Altamira. It's like, well, let's make some drawings here, because which is the impulse of the graffiti bombing. Is the impulse of humanity, to just like be like, I need to make an impression on that surface. So anyway, that's thank you. That's I'll next person.
I really love what you said about Altamira, because it's talking to a core behavior. It's not this culture or that culture. It's endemic. It's in us. And yeah, a blank anything is a challenge to an artist. It's like waving a flag. Like it's almost like a dare.
Uh-huh.
My other question was regarding this link between mask and atavismo. It could be a right word or not. Atavismo?
Atavismo.
Yes, in English.
I think atavismo. Let's Google that. Instantly.
Well, my thing is, I think as a human, we have, for instance, we have always feel attracted to fire. It's like you see a fire and you go there. No, I think mask in some way has in our AD have to have some connection with the human being that we are from thousands of years. And that's something atavic in some way, no? And this situation are pushing us because we have been through the 21st century through many situations with this hyper-capitalism and this terrible economic globalization order. So in some way, more and more they are pushing us more and more, and our reaction, I feel like, are more into questioning our humanity. So, yes. And yes, I just wrote about, a couple of months last year, it was a discussion about burqa, why all these women are not allowed in France to use burqa, or they were trying to put a law that women at least have to show their face, and now it's like nobody remembered about this discussion, and it was a really strong discussion in Europe, at least. Are we allowed to use the burqa or not? Okay. Or the hijab or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, and now you see all these girls here in Berlin with the burqa, with the hijab, and nobody questioned that. So I think all these things that we have been going through, economic crisis from 2010, I remember, and then we have all this crash here and the other, and then the pandemic, the global pandemic, and all these things bring us the question about what are we as a human being, and what is all this, let's say, device and all this construction. In truth, we are still the same, and there is a theories that we are still having the same brain. I'm sorry to say, from thousands of years before, we were in a cave.
Yeah.
Well, we are still having the same brain.
Okay,
what I mean is mask and fantasy and all this impersonation, this creation. I think in some way this atavism is bringing something deep inside about our humanity and impersonation in different characters, but not in regard or regarding gender. Mm-hmm. I know there is a lot of discussion. It's not political correctness to questioning all these new genders and so on. But I think that could be an interesting question about, no?
Quintin?
Yeah. I mean, I will jump in and very quickly and give you say soon. First off, I googled it. It is a word in English, atavism, right?
Atavism. Sorry, yeah. Maybe I know very current in my discourse, but there are some ideas coming in my mind where we are talking.
I think it's perfectly current, actually. So if it's defined as the reappearance of past characteristics, right? I'm reading it, right? Mm-hmm. It is the reapparition, the resurfacing of characteristics of our past, into the present. I think we're very much experiencing this. Okay. It is, I think I tried to define this and I lost my train of thought a little bit. But I guess I wanted to mention that, I mean, we're certainly like re-questioning core beliefs. Okay, so I agree. I must agree, and I also must give Paula the turn to speak while I search into my brain because I forgot my train of thought. So go ahead.
So atavism was a huge part of this show for certain artists who were bringing things up from the past, either the recent past or the ancient past. And in several cases, there was a question of not just remembering, but remembering ancestors. And, in some cases, they're resurrecting, the stories of ancestry, or they're resurrecting the bones. We do have a mask in there made of bones that is there to honor ancestors. In other cases, it's resurrecting the earth. Bringing back, there's one mask in there where the artist states that natural items like flowers and shells have become extremely rare in this world 100 years from now. And so this artist that we'll never get to meet because she's in 2120 is trying to resurrect the earth itself, is trying to resurrect the vividness of what the earth used to be. So it is interesting to look at all these masks and think, like, whenever someone says 100 years in the future, you always get that kind of World's Fair, robotic idea of like, but it never happens. That was supposed to be now, and we're not doing that now. And we're probably not going to be doing that 100 years from now across the board. Certain things will be different, but people will still be driven to resurrect an old religion, an old concept, an old land, to remember the ancestor. Because if we don't do that, we're losing hold of that thread that goes all the way back to Altamira, which is that our being is rooted in who we came from. Within our DNA is every ancestor we've ever had and every descendant we're ever going to have. It's inside of us right now. So if we stop connecting and reasserting the past in the present, whether it's now or 100 years from now, we're going to lose something that I think it would damage us permanently as human beings not to be able to have that level of connection.
I agree with that. Either way, we have a futuristic future, like how China is building now.
Yes.
Or either way, I think we have this. I don't want to think in binary way of thinking, but we should open up all this. And I think the mask, the Babel mask, shows very much about all this mix in between futuristic and ancestral. No, I think it's in that sense the whole project gives me hope. It's coming from artists or creative people, designers, fashion people, no, but still global. No, we are getting we got projects from different parts of the world, and the answer is quite similar. It's like come back to nature, but still we has been building these robotic things, and it's part of our culture, no? But still, so I think we have pretty good answer through the project to our questions.
I did too. I thought that the survey was exquisite. Not only the diversity of international applications, but also the diversity of styles. And actually, I remember what I wanted to mention, which is that I think my psychoanalyst used to quote often Jacques Derrida saying that the human being is an accumulation of contradictions, right? So we, within ourselves, are accumulatives of contradictions, right? So this is why, for example, you see a film like Metropolis back in the 30s, I believe, presenting the idea of a futuristic robot, right? So nothing looks more passé than the futuristic robot of Metropolis. You know, it looks like, wow, that is old, and it was meant
That's
to
so
be
1930s.
new. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said, yeah, I was agreeing that you look back at that and you identify that as a very 1930s concept.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean to interrupt, though. I apologize.
No, it's good. We're just adding to the conversation. Yeah. So anyway, so yes, so within humans, not only are we allowed, but it is natural, quote unquote, natural to contradict ourselves, to say yes, but not really at the same time. Like it is of human of human nature to contradict ourselves, to have antagonizing points of view, to be undecided among certain things, to not be binary, to not be black and white. And so this is where I find it so celebratory, and where I find it so exciting to see all these artists submitting their micro cosm contradictions expressed as art.
One thing.
So how are we doing on time? We have another round of questions?
I think we can do one more question.
Okay.
And then that'll be time for us.
Okay. So is it my turn to ask?
Sure. Yeah.
I think so, right?
Fire.
Okay. So this is a question that you guys already know about, because during the selection process, which by the way was it's always kind of nerve-wracking, to have different points of view and have to sort of like antagonize with each other, right? Like I know we all kind of wanted to agree on things, but there were many applications that we were yes, and you were but no, and I was but maybe, But anyway, thank you. It was a very civil process. I wanted to mention that. But so one of my concerns, which is I feel a very present day concern, had to do with gender politics, right? Which is not necessarily a new subject, but I feel that we're certainly living in a historical moment where it is at its most effervescent. Recently, I had a conversation with a friend who said very wisely, "It's hard to say the right thing nowadays. It's very easy to say the wrong thing. It's very easy to quote a term that has already become obsolete as of last week, and then all of a sudden using that term signifies a whole slew of problems. It's like, no, if you say equality instead of so the one in Puerto Rico is like igualdad versus equidad, right? So is it I don't know how to translate equidad, but equality versus equity, right? And that's not the same thing. But anyway, we can go back to vocabulary in a minute. But so I feel that some of the submissions, or there was a particular submission that I felt touched upon body politics, right? So and it was in terms of nudity, right? And nudity, of course, brings the realm of all sorts of sexuality questions, right? It brings up questions of perhaps, certainly the male gaze, which is what I was mostly concerned about. As we always refer to Laura Mulvey, speaking about how the construct of aesthetics has developed around the male gaze for any identification of gender, either male or female or any plus community. The business of aesthetics is built around the male gaze, and even questions about perhaps something as complicated as pornography, right? The gate into all of these questions, I felt some of our applicants really scratched on that, and so I wanted to ask you guys, perhaps as I understand, identifying as a non-hetero male as I do, like, how do you feel about these body politics or these like gender politics regarding these applications that for me were all of a sudden like I'm afraid to say anything. Like I'm afraid to even speak what I'm thinking because I might say the wrong thing. So what do you guys feel about these submissions that were scratching on those body politics?
Dermis, would you like to?
Well, first of all, I'm very afraid to hear that kind of opinions, in the sense that now no one wants to speak their mind because they think they could be wrong. And that's terrible. All this political, I think I totally agree, is fantastic where it's going on, because it really has to happen with this patriarchy that and actually I just want to mention briefly for instance, a good example now, the Berlin Biennale with Agustin Perez Rubio is one of the co-curators, Lise Lagnado. So when I was talking with him, he said, nosotras. Well, it's we, but we female, women. I was like, what? Yes, it's, because I'm the only male in the team, and I'm a gay person, and I don't want to, when they talk about us, they will refer to curators. No, I want from the beginning that we talk about nosotras, we, curators. I was like, okay, fantastic, this is brilliant. And then in Chile, you cannot talk about we have to talk about with X. No? I say, this is a challenger to language. How are we going to talk now? And one side, I'm really afraid about that because of this all political correctness, where all this political correctness take us. At the same time, as you point out, we were discussing, we saw this beautiful body. I was not bothered about that. How beautiful. It looks really, the mask with the body. And you say, okay, you were afraid to say, oh, but I'm going to look the skin or the mask, no? Maybe because I'm female, I have not that problem with the male gaze. But what I really, I'm afraid that people will be afraid of talk their minds. That's really terrible. And also, I don't see anything wrong, because it's not possible to erase it. Thousands of years of patriarchy. You cannot do it. You can burn all the city. Are we going back to the Middle Age to do that? You know what I mean? We're going to really burn all these buildings, which are very much about phallocentric buildings, no? Are we going to do that? No, that's part of us already. That's part of man's history. So if we're doing that, we're going to burn again Alexandria Library, the Babel Library, okay? Mm-hmm. So there are many questions around that. I think it's fine that it's the same like a colonialism, 500 years of colonialism. Are we going to erase with the revolution in racism? No, we are trying. And that's good to put, all these questions in front. But pretending that we're going to, feel like uncomfortable and we won't talk about our minds because we won't sound political correctness, I think it's also wrong. You say, I feel attracted with that body. It's fine. It's your feeling. I think it's totally wrong. I hope the art world won't get to that. I mean, I respect that Agustin Perez Rubio say, she, me, if I refer to myself, I'm a curator male, but if I refers to the whole team, we say women curators. No, I respect totally. That's fantastic. But at the same time, I respect the other way around. That's my point of view, which is not very political correctness now with the X.
What about you, Paula? What do you think?
Well, to respond to Dermis, I don't think that the entire idea of having an opinion one way or the other about those things, at one time it wasn't so fraught. At one time it wasn't so that, you know, if you expressed an opinion that was slightly out of line with whatever your tribal identity was, you know, that people kind of turn on their own right now. The number of circular firing squads that I've stepped away from in the last few years just keeps growing. And people seem to have forgotten the role of coalition, and they seem to have forgotten the role of cooperation and of alliance, you know, and knowing who your allies are and knowing who is for you is more important than knowing whether they think exactly the way you do. And the problem with that kind of purity of you may not express that opinion even if it's what you really feel, because it's not just unpopular, it's going to get you in this current culture, it's going to get you unfriended, which seems to be the main social weapon that we have right now. If you unfriend somebody, it didn't
like
used to be.
banishment.
Yeah, that, you know, it's saying I can't even deal with you. It's not we can talk about this. So I think that dissension and expression of your own opinion has been squashed not just by opposition telling you can't do that anymore, but being in your own circle and feeling that you are safe enough to express those things and still getting squashed for it. If we do that, then that's going to stifle all discourse, and we're not going to be able to. Yeah. We're not going to be able to absorb, consider. You know, in a way, we're kind of cheating ourselves, because to receive a different point of view is a gift, and to develop the capacity to consider it and not just dismiss it out of hand is a responsibility. I think it's a social responsibility. To talk about there was a mask that came up in the jury that we ultimately did not accept. And there were several reasons for it, but the main one was, as I recall for me, was that the mask didn't fit the brief. The mask could be anything, but it had to protect the nose and mouth the same way that our masks do now. And this one didn't accomplish that, and so that was why I was ready to say no to that mask. But you know, Quintin, you also pointed out that the image that was sent us, the photograph, was not necessarily of the mask. It focused more on the body of the person wearing the mask. And it was a beautiful photograph, and it was a beautiful photograph of a young person. But you were right that the artist was relying very much not just on the exposure, but on the pose. That the pose plays very much into a male gaze, and as I remember, that was one of your reasons for being a little bit reluctant
on the fence.
Right. Yeah. So in the end, that mask wasn't accepted, but it did got me thinking. And you know, I don't know if you guys can hear my cat. Yeah. So how to develop a perspective that can be inclusive and that also doesn't depend on the sexualization of the feminine pose would be something to think about, would be something to work for. that being said, I mean, if there had been a different theme to the show, if it had been about questions of desire or questions of presentation, that might have been a different story. Yeah, so it's difficult because on the one hand, you could say that by selecting against that artist that we were also imposing a set of political rules on the image. But for me, it was really because it didn't fit the brief. Yeah, and I don't know if that really answers your question, Dermis, but for me, that was kind of where the rubber hit the road.
Yeah, because we have two cases. That's what happening. One is the one that you mentioned, and the other were a beautiful photo as well. But it wasn't only the mask; also was the body of the artist, and that was the point if we accepted or not. Because in truth, the mask that I think there were two projects. So one, yes.
So the one that we did accept into the show, it gave me a different feeling. In other words, I thought it was inverting the male gaze, and it was it was subjecting the viewer to a potentially female gaze. And I just thought of this as you said that. It reminds me very much of the uproar that was caused by Manet's painting Olympia.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that most people got really crazy about when that painting was first exhibited was that the woman was not ashamed of herself. She's nude, but she's adorned. She has a little necklace on. She's got her little shoes on, and she's clearly the one in power. She's clearly the one who's doing the appraising. And this particular mask actually reminded me of Olympia for that reason. The mask is designed in such a way that you simply see one eye and the rest of the head is covered. We see a little bit of the shoulder, enough to know that the person is, if not totally naked, at least probably naked from the waist up. But the confrontation in the photograph, the direct gaze from the eye, sort of stirs up an uncomfortable knowledge that you're also being appraised. So I think that was actually kind of a difference between those two. And I apologize for interrupting, but I just the Olympia concept I realized is very much at play in that particular. And so I didn't have the same feeling about it, but you were bringing up both of those, so I want to throw it back to you, Dermis.
I think I would like to say to Quintin that with all what I said before, that it's fine to express yourself because it brings in front your concern, and that already show you that you are conscious about that. Therefore, as Paula said already, I don't think so. It was particular the last case that you mentioned before. It wasn't around, of trying to get the male gaze. No, it was another kind of game in some way. No, it was about the texture of the mask with the texture of the skin, and this only and the eye. It was that kind of, for me, kind of fabric, like a like a body, like as a fabric, and this mask as a fabric, as a tissue. I don't know if I express myself properly.
Yeah.
In that case, and you have this only eye that, in that case, Quintin raised the question because he was afraid that maybe it was so beautiful the colors, the contrast, everything, that he was afraid to maybe could be the male gaze. And I don't think so in that in that mask, no. But it's really good that he said that, because already, already it's part of the discussion, and that's fantastic. That was my point. And the first case, it was clearly no feeling, it was no a mask. It was a picture. It was a beautiful picture that was clear to you, to Quintin, and to me. So I think there is no discussion about about gender issues here.
Well, I want to say, like, who's afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Who is afraid of gender issues?
Well, listen, because honestly, as a postmodern male, as a conscious political person nowadays, as a father who's raising a daughter who does not want for her to live inside the constrictions of patriarchy, I want to be the change, right? I don't want the change to happen. I want to be the change. And so I'm afraid where to walk. Like, I feel that I am constantly getting, like, slapped, like, and but I want to do that. I want to somehow be like the poster person to get slapped in the face of everybody. So males like myself can be like, oh well, that's not the way. Look what happened to Quintin, And so, I mean, of course, I'm joking. I'm sort of being sarcastic about this. Of course, I don't enjoy punishment. I certainly do not. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be a conflicting entity. I mean, so far as my artwork is concerned, well, yes, in my artwork, I do want to be a conflicting voice so that we can sort of like desmenuzar, so we can untangle these questions. But I want to take this forum and do something that I've been wanting to do for many months, maybe even years. And I think this is a conversation Paula and I had at one point, which is that I want to ask for forgiveness. I want to say I'm sorry, as in the same way that cultures have done this regarding the past. I think it's time for men to start saying openly, I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for what my father did. I'm sorry for what my grandfather did. We didn't know any better. We didn't break it, but we're going to fix it, okay? I inherited the broken machine. I inherited the broken language. I inherited the broken behavior. I didn't invent it. And that's not excusing myself. That is taking responsibility for it, okay? So I want to re-examine my every move, my every word from now on. But before I do that, I want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that white, hetero, male, masculine, hetero, whatever, everything. But that's going to change. That's changing today. I'm starting today. And please point out to me that I should or should not. Please help me understand the path, because in the end, I want to be an ally. But I first need to understand what an ally is. I first need to understand what you need from an ally. Because, for example, I've been saying for 20 years, I'm a feminist, I'm a feminist, I'm a feminist. And all of a sudden, some younger feminists are like, well, you cannot be a feminist because you're not a feminine. And I was like, well, you got to explain that to me, because I've been saying I'm a feminist for 20 years, and if identity is a chosen thing, well, then I am a feminist. But perhaps I don't need to be one. Maybe I just need to be an ally. And that's feminism. Okay. I don't want more protagonism. I want more justice.
You're breaking the mask.
Feminism is a set of ideas. Anybody can be a feminist. And I'm saying that as a second wave feminist. I'm old. I was born in
As,
1970. So, speaking of being born, happy birthday, Quintin.
oh, Quintin.
Feliz
Oh, wow.
cumpleaños.
Oh, feliz cumpleaños.
Gracias. This could not be any more fun of a celebration for me.
But
Well,
as far
as much as we can talk about empower women that they became male, they must become male in order to empower themselves. I hope this is going to break. Like we're talking about camioneras, truck drivers, female truck drivers. That's actually also, no? Why?
I think that mass communication has allowed the conversation to sort of spill all over the place. So, what a feminist is, what an ally is, has taken on so many dimensions. But one of the angles that I particularly appreciate is that we're still in a place where the scales are tipped toward men, that men are still the ones who hold the power, and we all know that. And so a man who wants to be an ally to women talks to other men or calls out their behavior, because a woman trying to talk to some men or trying to call out behavior can be more easily dismissed. But as a man in that tent, when you see someone misbehaving and you simply don't react, if a sexist joke comes up, you say, I don't think that's funny. Or you assume the role of a mentor. You assume the role of the leader. And Quintin, what you described is you being the point of the lance. So it tells me that your own temperament, your personality suits you to that. But, for any man who's watching this, I would say that you are an ally by seeing and calling out bad behavior to other men when you see it. And that requires a little bit of rewiring, but maybe not as much as you'd think. And having those conversations with women, I think if you find yourself in a place where you get shouted down by everyone for having a point of view, that's probably not a circle of women who are prepared to engage. And they all have their own reasons. But, in the one-on-one, it might be a little easier to kind of approach those things because, I can't think of any women that I know personally who wouldn't be glad to engage in these conversations and to offer a point of view, because it is less common than it should be that a man, wants to understand this kind of thing, because it puts them in a very vulnerable position. And that's amazing. That shows a lot of respect for the situation itself. So that's how I'd answer your question there.
I totally agree, because you don't have to pretend, and that's fantastic. Pretension is, for me, is the worst. No, if you are telling yourself that, and as I said before, we are human beings. No, there's a lot of thousands of social historical construction, but starting from that, you are giving big step and asking for forgiveness. I think it's a little too far, too much. No, sorry, the song is getting in my.
Well, I think we should.
I think it's a very nice and actually you say that, but it's like I asking forgiveness for what have done my grandmother or my grandfather. Who I am because of them. So, and I think the important thing is regarding the situation that we are, we don't have to mask ourselves, or if we build a mask, we build a mask that really portray our deep inside identity. I don't know if I make clear about that, but it's really touching to hear what you say in your birthday.
Yeah.
But I think you're a man of your actions, and
Definitely.
thank you anyway. Thank you, and happy birthday. Yes.
I think that that's a really good place to stop.
Yeah, I think so. Or we get sentimental here.
It's a wonderful place to leave the conversation. And
Somebody say we should stop now, Paula.
I think so.
Yeah.
I close the door because otherwise I will have
I
the
live
same.
in a one-room house. I have no. So yes, my little beast here. I want to thank you guys so much. I'm so grateful to you for being part of this and for believing in the project and for being so enthusiastic about it. And you've helped shape something really beautiful. And I thank you very much for it. I'm honored that you guys were part of this.
I'm grateful that you invite me, and we really, it has been brief, but very intense, and I'm really glad, and in some way I feel connected with both of you, and I hope we can still connect it through
Always.
the times. And it has been a real pleasure, and I'm very grateful of you thinking about me for this project.
Yeah, me too. I am super happy. I mean, I've known Dermis and of Dermis's work for many years now, and this is the first time that we actually got to be in-depth acquainted. So for me, that's been very beautiful. Also, I think Paula came up with an amazing idea.
Yes.
The BABEL Masks exhibition, from the first moment I heard it, I was like, this is not only like perhaps a historical exhibition, but it's definitely a photograph of a moment in time. It's the
Yes.
same way than a diary or a family album. Like, we are always grateful to then look back and say, I'm so happy we did that, because it was a very intense moment in everybody's experience. So thank you both. And I also want to thank the artists. All the artists that applied, all the submissions were very exciting. And of course, as always, it's sad that some of them could not be included for whatever reasons they were. But even then, they were part of a historical idea. So
Yes.
thank you so much, and I look forward to the next project too.
Yes, wonderful. Okay. Thank you guys.
Okay. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Quintin. Have a beautiful day.